Hey guys, it's Simon and Ben from Pumped On Property here. Today we're going to be talking about the 10 things that you shouldn't tell your real estate agent when buying a house. So some of the topics that we're going to be focusing on today are borrowing capacity, when you need to buy the property, how much you're willing to pay, and 7 other really important things to not share with your real estate agent. So let's get into this one today. Ben, do you want to start with the first few?
Yeah, so obviously it's a no-brainer. Don't tell the real estate agent how much you can spend. Now, I was talking to Simon about this just before the video. Let's say that you can borrow $1 million just theoretically, and you're looking in a suburb where the average house price is $500K. Telling the real estate agent that you've got $1 million to spend looks like cha-ching symbols in their mind, and they're going to potentially, good real estate agents are potentially going to drive you up from that base because they know you can spend more. So never give them your borrowing capacity, but it is okay to let them know, to give them security that you do have finance approval, which I think is very important to organise before you start looking for a property.
So the second thing is when you actually need to buy the property. So you want to make sure that the real estate agent doesn't understand in what sort of urgency that you need to purchase that property for.
It's really important to not let them know that you need to find a property within the next month because you've sold your home. It seems like a no-brainer, but people do this all the time. They create urgency, which means the agent can use that urgency against you. And you know, the ideal time to buy is when you don't need to buy a property. The ideal time to buy is when other people aren't buying property, but most of us get caught up in that, particularly if you've done what I've done in the past as an amateur, and that is sold my property thinking that I'd be moving straight into another one, then not being able to find it for 6 months and moving in with my in-laws into like a 3x3 meter room with 2 kids. So, you know, that's something that comes up. They don't need to know when you're looking to buy, whether you want to move to another state, whether you need to move to a property because you've sold yours. You know, they don't need to know the motivation. They just need to know that you're in the marketplace and this property does or doesn't fit your criteria.
Exactly, and that slides us into part 3 now. So how much you're willing to pay, and it kind of links to your borrowing capacity. You may be able to purchase the property for a significant amount, but that doesn't mean that you're willing to pay that amount. So you really need to understand what the market value is for the property that you're looking at, what the median house price in that suburb is, and make sure that you understand exactly how much you should pay and how much you're willing to pay for the property.
A great question that good real estate agents ask is, how much do you think the property's worth? Which is their soft way of asking how much are you willing to pay, or what is your borrowing capacity. Now, if you're a smart buyer, definitely don't answer that question. You completely avoid that question, and maybe, as Zoolander says, answer that question with another question type thing. As Simon said, like, that is a great agent is always going to ask you that question. That's their soft way of getting a gauge on the market, so they can give feedback to their seller and so that they can get a gauge on where you potentially see value. And I see people all the time say that they think the property's worth this, which is 20, 30, 40 grand more than what they're expecting. An example of this was, I just sold one of my investment properties, which was our old office. I sold it in the first day. I expected to get $520,000 for it. A first-time buyer came through it and said that they would pay $565,000 for it. You know, they've just cost themselves $45,000 because they didn't know market values. As Simon said, jump on the sold section of realestate.com, see what other properties are selling for in the area. You know, get a really good idea of that, and then you don't have to disclose that information with the agent until you find the property you like. Maybe you can find some lower valued properties that you can print out and give to the agent so that you can start to set their expectations a little bit lower. Be a bit cheeky with it.
Definitely, I like that one. So number 4 is how much you really want to purchase the property, because especially if it's a PPR, there's going to be a few emotional decisions, and it might be in the perfect street. You might know some of the neighbours. It might be really close to the school that you want to go to, you want your kids to go to. It might be close to the train station to get to work, or infrastructure that you really want to be close by. But once again, the agent doesn't need to know these things. You can keep them to yourself, and you understand the value that you see in that property, but the agent doesn't need to know that, because 9 times out of 10 they will use that against you.
An example of this, obviously in the last example I showed you how I made a little bit of money. I'll tell you now how I lost $100,000 from exactly this. So recently my wife found a property online that she absolutely fell in love with. We went and saw the property. It was the first week in a suburb where the average property value is quite high and the average property takes like 80 days to sell. And my wife, being so emotional about the property, went and saw the property, went back and saw the property again. I didn't even know she was looking at it at that point. She told the agent that we really wanted to buy it before she talked to me. You know, and so I didn't have any leverage when I went to go and buy this property. I did everything I possibly could, but because she was so emotionally involved in wanting the property and not wanting to lose it, we ended up paying what I thought was about $100,000 more than what the market value of the property was at the time. The cool thing about that is it is a rising market here in Queensland at the moment, so we set a new ceiling for the suburb and now everybody's paying over the top of that, and so it's brought it up to about market value now. But you know, she gave away all of our cars. She told them that we really wanted it. And I did want the property, but it gave us no leverage. And the guy that we were negotiating against flipped properties for a living. It was a very sophisticated agent. So even with my skill set, because of what my wife had given away, we become unstuck.
Yeah, it's really hard to justify between the two of an owner-occupier, where you want to live with your family, and an investment. Obviously there's going to be so many more emotional attachments to an owner-occupied home compared to an investment. So if you are investing, you need to make sure you're focusing on the hard numbers.
Yeah, and you know, I'm going to live in this home for the next 20 years. I didn't care. Like my soul cared, because I'm such a tight ass by nature. I didn't want to. I don't like overpaying for anything. In fact, like, I pride myself on my ability to find under market value and off market listings for myself and clients. But you know, I know I'm going to be there in the long term. I know that over the next 20 years I'm going to double my money on what I've paid for this property, so I don't have a fear of that. It was just, you know, when I'm focusing on investment, I never would have let that happen. It was just because it was so emotional for my wife, and you know, now emotional for me. Like, I absolutely love the place, and sometimes paying a little bit more than it's worth for what you want, if you're going to stay there forever, is cool.
Exactly. So let's move on to the fifth thing that we wanted to talk about today, and that is if you have plans to improve the property. So there's obviously a number of different ways that you can manufacture value of an investment property or your PPR. And you want to withhold this information, because if the real estate agent understands what your plans are for that property is, they're going to leverage that against you and try and make you pay a premium for that product. So what type of things do people look for when improving their property?
Look, I think, you know, there's the old renovator, which, you know, you find the ugly duckling and you clean it up. There's the old 3-bedroom to 4-bedroom conversion. There's the old raise it up from a single-story home to a double-story home. Then there's the blocks that, you know, maybe in the future you could build a duplex on, or you could subdivide, or you could build townhouses on. Now, sometimes you find these rare opportunities where the person selling the property doesn't know what they're selling, and we bought about 3 or 4 of these in Brisbane in the last 4 years, where we found a site where you can build 6 townhouses on it, but they were just selling it as a residential piece of land or a house. And so that opportunity could come up. The last thing you want to tell the agent is that you know the town plan that they forgot to talk to their owner about, and you know, as soon as they find out about it, they want to sell it to you for 200 grand more than they did the day before. You know, in particular with planning to improve the property, the last thing the seller wants to know is that somebody is profiting from their investment and it's not them or their own home, particularly if it's an owner-occupier. So there's some suburbs within sort of 6 to 9 Ks of Brisbane right now where you can buy a property for about 650K, but there's really nicely renovated larger homes in the same suburb or same street selling for 900K. And so if you were to come in and buy it for 650, put 150 grand into it, you might end up with a property that's valued at 900K and you've all of a sudden made $100,000 or $150,000 profit. That's cool, but when you're buying that property, the person that you're buying from and the agent doesn't need to know that, because all of a sudden, if they know that there's a good 100K margin in there for you, they might want to charge you a little bit more, and if it's the only product on the market at that time, you could lose a really good opportunity.
Yeah, that's a really, really good one, and I like the value of being able to increase the value of the property, but yeah, keep that one up your sleeve in the future for sure.
Yeah, don't tell people you're planning on improving the property and making money off them. Like, no one feels like they've lost out. A great real estate transaction is where the agent, the owner and you all win together.
Exactly. So the sixth thing that we wanted to talk about today is if you're an out of area buyer. So let's say you want to move states, or you're thinking of purchasing an investment property in a different state or a different area that you're not too familiar with. You know, the real estate agent is going to know what the market value is for that property that they're selling. So if they know that you're out of area, they might know that you're not as sophisticated as they are in that particular area, and they're going to try and use that against you to make sure that you pay a little bit more, which is a thing that happens really often.
All the time. Average vendor discount is a good gauge. If you're an out of area person looking to buy a property, you could see what it's listed on realestate.com. Let's say the average vendor discount in the area is 5%. You can take 5% straight off that realestate.com price in the first week. So agents love out of area people. Like, I like personally buying from out of area agents, because you know, you as the buyer doesn't know shit. Them as the agent selling out of their local area doesn't know anything either. So it's a really, really powerful way to overpay. A good agent can get you to overpay. Remember that their game is negotiating 24/7, and if they've been in the industry 10, 15, 20 years, they've probably got a skill set and they've seen it all before that's going to cost you money. So they don't need to know that you're out of area. They just need to know that you know your stuff, which means coming back to the market value or the valuation for that particular property, so that you know your walk away point, regardless of if you really want it or don't want the property.
Perfect. So the seventh thing that we wanted to talk about today is if you've just missed out on another property, you don't want to let them know, because obviously you've just gone through the process of submitting contracts, submitting offers, and you might have been unsuccessful in a heated market, and that can create emotional decisions, because you're like, damn, I was so close, but now I feel like I'm so far, so I'm going to pay more for the property just because I feel like I've missed out.
Tony writes about this in his book Unshakable. He does a whole chapter devoted to this concept, which is investor bias, and one of the investor biases that a lot of us face as humans is investor fatigue, which, as Simon said, means you've just missed out on another property, you're emotionally connected. Maybe you were looking at properties for 2 months before that point, and you've just got to this point where you've completely got the shits with it all. Again, a great agent is going to pick up on that fatigue, and they are going to close you on that property and create urgency just to get the deal done. So be really, really, really careful with disclosing the fact that you're fatigued, that you've been looking for a while, or that you've just missed out on another property, because, you know, if a sophisticated agent sees that coming, they're going to definitely exploit that opportunity.
Okay, so the eighth thing that we're going to talk about today is your motivations for purchasing that property. So there's two major motivations that we're going to talk about, and that's, are you purchasing for an investment, or are you purchasing for an owner-occupier, which we've kind of talked a little bit throughout the other topics in this video today. But do you want to expand on that a little bit, please?
Just super simple. Like, they don't need to know that you're buying that home for your family to live in because they're going to want to try and sell you, you know, that for a premium because it's emotional. On the flip side of that, you know, they don't need to know that you're an investor either. An investor means one of two things to an agent. Either they're out of area and they're going to get a premium for the property, or they're just hard work because they're going to negotiate. They're going to negotiate really, really hard, and, you know, just waste the agent's time. So they don't need to know that information. You just keep that up your sleeve.
Cool, and the ninth thing that we're going to talk about, Ben briefly mentioned during point 7, is how long you've been looking for. So it comes back to that investor fatigue and the investor bias. If you've been looking in the market, it can be really draining on yourself, spending all of your Saturdays at open for inspections, talking with real estate agents, negotiating with real estate agents, dealing with other buyers, potentially submitting offers. It can become a really heavy burden if you've been looking for months and months and months and not being able to identify that right property. But one thing that you definitely want to withhold from the real estate agent for sure.
Definitely, and I think the last thing, or the 10th thing that we wanted to talk about, is that you're a first-time buyer or first-time investor. Again, I know that that comes with its own challenges. There's fear there. There's all of those things that we all go through each time we buy a property, whether it's our first or our 50th. You know, it makes us feel uncomfortable getting into huge amounts of debt and, you know, not being able to accurately predict the future. But again, an agent doesn't need to know that it's your first time round, and honestly, you shouldn't be buying if you still feel like you're that green and that you are like a first-time investor or first-time buyer. The reality is you should know the market well enough, the suburb well enough, the types of property and the valuations of those properties, as well as the streets like the back of your hand, before you ever consider going and checking out properties or before you start placing offers. Again, like, I just don't think an agent needs to know that information, because, you know, again, that's a sign for a mature agent to potentially exploit a higher purchase price and put pressure. Like, agents are kings of placing pressure. You walk into open homes all the time and the first thing you hear is, we've had a bunch of other people through the property, we've got other offers on the property. You know, some of them actually openly lie about offers that they've got, some of them lie about pressure from other people, some of them lie about the purchase prices. So you've just got to be careful, you've got to protect yourself. Unfortunately, it is a negotiation process whether you like it or not, and until real estate agents aren't the ones selling properties anymore, we're going to have these things. So to wrap everything back up, we've talked about the 10 things that you shouldn't tell an agent. We've talked about borrowing capacity, when you need to buy, how much you're willing to pay, that you really want the property and that you have plans to improve the property, that you're from an out of area or from a different state, that you've missed out on other properties, your motivations for your purchase, whether they're owner, occupier or investor to live in, how long you've been looking for the property, which relates to fatigue, and then whether you're a first-time buyer or a first-time investor. So that's a pretty good wrap-up. I know there are a few things to consider, but you know, maybe you can just jot those 10 little things down on a piece of paper and read them every time before you walk into an open home for at least the first month, so that, you know, you're just not disclosing too much. Again, you want to create a personal relationship with the agent. You want to be friendly. You want them to know that you're serious about the property, that you're in a pre-approved position, that you're actively looking to buy right now. But you don't want to give away things that are going to take away your leverage either. So wrapping it all up, if you know, investing in property is something you're seriously thinking of doing, Simon and I run Pumped On Property, a buyer's agent. We'd love to offer you a one-on-one strategy session, particularly if you're thinking about buying in the next 6 to 12 months, where we can look at where you are right now, where you'd like to be in 12 months, where you'd like to be in 15 to 20 years, what's holding you back, and then spend some time educating you on the Australian property market and, you know, learning more about what it is you're planning on doing. So to book one of those sessions, just jump over to www.pumpedonproperty.com, click the free strategy session button and find a time that works for you. We really appreciate your attention and time today, and good luck with your journey.